thing's practically been out in the open, that these are not just trade talks. This is United States of America trying to pressurize India to make a geopolitical choice. So some of the questions that we'd be posing in this debate is President Trump clearly linking Indian tariffs to the Ukraine war and trade talks hinging on the Trump-Putin meet at the Alaska summit later this week. Trade talks a long haul ahead, and should India wait and watch or retaliate? How should India retaliate? What explains Trump's Pakistan embrace? All of these questions taken to our panelists, Ashok Sajjanhar, former Indian diplomat, Mr. Brahma Chalani, strategic affairs expert, Mr. K.C. Singh, former secretary, MEA. I'd like to begin with Mr. Brahma Chalani. Mr. Brahma Chalani, how should India now, because we've seen the kind of language that Asim Munir has made on US soil, how would you reckon India should calibrate its diplomatic response, especially to Pakistan's nuclear threat issued on US soil?
Well, for the US, Pakistan has long been a useful pawn for its South Asian policy. This means the US is willing to overlook Pakistan's terrorism track record, especially given that Pakistan's terrorism is largely directed at India. And this may explain why Rubio recently thanked Pakistan for, quote unquote, countering terrorism and preserving regional stability. In fact, just yesterday, Rubio listed Balochistan's Majid Brigade as a terror outfit. And this came just 3 weeks after Pakistan requested such action. But I think we have to look at what's happening in the larger US-India context. Russian oil is just a pretext to strong-arm India into accepting a Trump-dictated trade agreement. That is, tariffs on India have little to do with Russian oil is evident from one telling fact. Indian exports to the US of refined fuels, such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, remain exempt from his tariffs. So Trump has no problem with Russian oil as long as it is refined in India and then pumped into American planes, trucks, and cars. And as we all know that the US continues to import Russian enriched uranium, fertilizers, and chemicals. So in a sense, what Trump is doing, he's using India's Russian oil purchases as a crude bargaining tactic to secure a bilateral trade deal on his terms. In fact, as the Washington Post has reported the other day, the Trump administration has weaponized tariffs not merely to extract trade concessions, but also to bind other countries more closely to US strategic and security interests. And in India's case, they're trying to bend India to the American will by targeting the country's traditionally independent approach to global affairs. So it's not just about trade then, it's about India's independent approach to global affairs. True. It's about undermining India's neutrality in international affairs. So there are larger issues at stake now.
All right, so larger issues, and this is something which we've spoken about ad nauseum, the sheer fact that this is really not so much about trade, but pushing India to make a geopolitical choice. But Ashok Sajjanhar, to put the focus on what Asim Munir issued, a clear nuclear threat from US soil, how would you reckon, what are the channels diplomatically that India can engage to express its concerns without, of course, escalating tensions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Preeti, for having me on the show. You're very right. As far as Asim Munir's statement in Tampa, Florida is concerned, India, through its Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson, has already given out its version, its response, basically saying that it's highly regrettable that this statement has come, leaving it open to the international community to draw their own conclusions, and also expressing serious regret that it has come from the soil of a friendly third country. So, and also reiterating what has been our stand, that India is never going to cow down under any nuclear blackmail or nuclear threat. So I think as far as this messaging is concerned, this is the right message. We have not gone, to the sort of rhetoric and the intemperate language that has been used by Munir. We shouldn't bring ourselves stoop down to that particular level. But as far as the United States is concerned, definitely, we don't have an ambassador, a US ambassador in India at the moment. The Sharjah is there, and the Sharjah definitely, in my view, needs to be spoken to. We need to take it up with the US government that this is not the way that you provide a platform to, an avowed hostile power and enemy power who's sort of, carrying on terrorist actions in India, against India, as we have seen just recently on the 22nd of April, that you give full freedom to that individual to come and spout venom against India. So definitely take it up with the United States. It's good that there have been no ministerial statements that have emanated, but definitely at the diplomatic level, this point definitely needs to be made to the US administration.
Bring in Mr. KC Singh, but given, Mr. Singh, Pakistan leveraging of counter-terrorism cooperation and economic promises to gain US favor, should India now also prioritize diplomatic channels or multilateral forums, BRICS, SCO, to offset Pakistan's influence and maintain its strategic autonomy?
Look, nothing's going to happen in SCO. The Chinese will not take it up. Although the rationale for creating that organization was counterterrorism originally, but it's moved on to other things, and the Chinese will not let us broach the subject there. I think we should just ignore it. This is only the language is new. It's coming from a friendly country's soil, but this is not the first time Pakistan has tried nuclear blackmail. Whenever there was confrontation with India and they wanted even Kargil, when they found that they are on the back foot, they'll start moving their weapons around. And they knew that the Americans will see that they are handling the nuclear weapons, they're moving them about, and they would come running to the doorstep and say, hey, don't fight, we don't want a conflagration involving the region. But what is different? All these are interlinked. I don't think we should see approach to Pakistan separate now. This is not a new development, because inviting General Munir to a lunch and then having the gumption to also invite the Indian Prime Minister, who was then in Canada, that why don't you swing by the White House when the army chief is there? And this is just about a few months after what Pakistan had done in Pahalgam. It showed that Trump is completely transactional. He's unconcerned about any of the old links, considerations. It's an entirely new world that we are dealing with. And therefore, there's a new way that we have to approach it. And I think with Trump, it has to be just answer back, correct the record, which is what the Europeans have done. There's no need to get into an argument with him, like Zelensky made the mistake of doing in the White House. By the same time, correct the facts, keep sticking to your basic positions, see if you can sit across the negotiating table and have a deal. The extra thing that is put in, I mean, what pressure is going to come on Russia, because bulk of the oil is bought by China. And vis-a-vis China, the Americans are backed off. After the Chinese said they will hold back on the rare earths, the duties were brought down from 150% to 50%. And now he's given another 90 days to China to finalize the deal. So with Trump, I think there is a methodology which is emerging, which is that you keep up the pressure, you see how to approach him or focus on subjects he's interested in. And I think in case of India, the farm products are coming in the way, which are politically very sensitive in India. But somehow I think Trump is stuck on that. But we have to adopt a new way of dealing with Trump. And I think that is the challenge for Indian diplomacy. And this will carry on. He'll reach out to Pakistan, he'll reach out. He'll say good things about China one day, he'll say bad things about China the other day. Just ignore all that. But straighten out the record when he goes into man-made facts and his own assumption of how the world runs.
Mr. Brahmacharani, so what is this new form of diplomacy that possibly India needs to tail? Because Prime Minister is expected to hold bilateral talks with the Chinese President Xi Jinping on the side of the SCO summit. Is there even a possibility somewhere down the line to counterbalance the US-Pakistan reset here? Or with the way things are developing, with the doublespeak of President Trump, especially vis-a-vis China, that's not even a possibility?
Well, India is signaling that it has other geopolitical options. Russian President Putin is expected to visit India later this month or maybe in the coming weeks. And the Prime Minister is going to China now for the SCO summit. But the bigger issue is this, that the US-India relationship has probably plunged to its lowest point in this century, thanks to Trump's economic war and his singling out of India for secondary sanctions. And the damage to this relationship will not be easily repairable, even if a bilateral trade agreement is eventually reached, because what has happened is that the mutual trust that had underpinned the growing US-India strategic partnership, that mutual trust has been eroded. In fact, in a way, one can say that Trump has opened India's eyes. He has his sanctions and tariff blitz may have done India a favor by exposing the strategic reality of America's unreliability. By presenting the US as a fickle transactional power, Trump has signaled that Washington cannot be counted on to separate short-term commercial considerations from long-term strategic imperatives. Now, this is a serious blow to the security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. A stable Indo-Pacific order demands more than just joint US-India military exercises and communiques. It requires political will to accommodate each other's core interests. Punishing India in ways that ignore its legitimate security and energy needs sends the opposite message. This is especially so given the fact that from the time that Joe Biden was in the White House, we have seen how US and Indian interests have become increasingly divergent in India's own immediate neighborhood. So while India and the US talk about global strategic partnership, in India's own immediate neighborhood, the US is working against India's core interests, whether it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Myanmar. The US and India are not on the same page. They are, in fact, on opposite sides. And how to address these issues has become an important challenge for India's foreign policy and also for India's security.
Mr. Sajjanar, would you want to weigh in on this? Because under President Trump, clearly there's been a reset where Pakistan is concerned and the writings on the wall for India. On the other hand, you've had, we've spoken about the Indian Prime Minister traveling to China. There is a bilateral on the side of the SCO summit. Also, most important, would you reckon in midst of this could very well be the Alaska summit, because the failure or the success of that could very well define the India and US relationship going further?
Yeah, many questions you have posed. Let me try to respond to at least a few of them. The first is on the Alaska summit. So if there are positive results of the Alaska summit, it will have an impact on the 25% additional tariffs due to India's purchase of Russian oil that, will be impacted. The other 25% base tariffs, because we have not been able to reach a trade deal, nothing will happen to that. So we need to continue to negotiate with the United States. I think we need to recognize Preeti here, and I think definitely both the other panelists do recognize that, as does much of India, that this is a consequential relationship as far as India is concerned, and it is behoves upon both India and the United States to preserve that relationship, and I think we should continue with the trade negotiations. The other point, and of course, having put our red lines very, very clearly, see what else is possible, as far as trade deficit, $40 billion. India is number 10 or 11 as far as countries with whom the United States has adverse balance of trade. So we can see where we can pitch in as far as increased imports of LNG are concerned. Last time, you would recall Trump 1.0, we had said, okay, we are going to buy more aircrafts, etc. See what those possibilities are. Now, you also mentioned about, Prime Minister's visit to China. Let's go to China with open eyes. While we meet Mr. Putin, Prime Minister Modi meets Mr. Putin, that is very good. Discuss, Putin will be coming to India also. As far as China is concerned, it is sitting on 38,000 square kilometers of my territory. It is eyeing 93,000 square kilometers of my territory more. It is the one that has not indirectly, but it has actively supported, Pakistan in the conflict that took place, the 4-day conflict that took place, not only with equipment, but also with intelligence, with everything that it has done. So, there are very, there might be a attempt at a reset, but there are very strong limits and,
Well, true, the
contours
geopolitical
and
map around India
parameters
has also
under which.
changed, you're right.
So we can't go blindfolded
True.
that, if Trump is behaving in this manner, we go into the embrace of China. No, not at all. That is just not possible. But that having been said, we, of course, go around with other partners. As I mentioned, Putin is there. We have a UK-India FTA. We make sure that EU-India FTA succeeds. Look at the India GCC discussions, India Mercosur. You would remember that when PM was in Brazil, we discussed about the India Mercosur FTA.
Right.
So I think all those possibilities are there. It is not as if India does not have options. In my view, India has very tangible, viable options. Fourth largest economy, fastest growing major economy. And as people have said, $40 billion out of $800 billion, meaning it is about 5% or something of that sort that your exports are going to be. But continue with the negotiations, continue the conversation. I'm not saying that, what Munir is doing or what Trump is doing, that we sort of, sit back and say that, we are going to withdraw from this. So continue the conversation, but also look at other alternatives.
Mr. KC Singh, do you concur? Because, ultimately all eyes right now, which we were speaking of earlier, will be on the Alaska summit. And how much do you think that meeting between President Trump and Putin have a bearing on tariffs where India is concerned? Do you think that's going to be key?
Look, that's an ideal best case scenario. I don't think anybody is, even President Trump himself has climbed down. He's not saying he's going to bring back a deal. He's not saying, I'll see what's on Putin's mind. And then the Europeans are having a teleconference with the Americans and including President of Ukraine. And they're going to be putting pressure on Trump that you can't go there and just decide on behalf of Ukraine what territory can be ceded. It's a sovereign country. And President Brzezinski is right that he would have to consult his own people, including perhaps a referendum. So it's not something which Trump can do. He can just go there and I think Trump is beginning to realize that. So I don't expect any tremendous outcome out of the Alaska summit. Best case scenario is that, yes, Putin climbs down and Putin says, okay, I don't want the whole of Donbass. I'll be willing to settle for what I have. And that is then the starting point of Brzezinski and the Russians sitting down together and talking about it. Then, of course, we can say that the oil sanctions regarding Russian oil can go off. Because one of the things that Putin would demand from the Americans is for the US to lift sanctions. So if the American sanctions are lifted, where is the question of imposing sanctions on India to be trading with Russia? But the problem is more complicated. You see, we're in a sense back to the 20th century of bipolarity. The bipolarity this time is US on one side and China and Russia on the other. Now, in this bipolarity, the problem is in the 20th century, we had non-aligned movement. But one of the poles, that is Soviet Union, was friendly towards the non-aligned countries. We didn't have any conflict of interest with them. This time, we have a problem with one of the poles, as Mr. Sajjanar has just pointed out. How do you deal with China? Because we have outstanding problems.
Right.
It's very clearly, it was involved in the
Operations
4-day battle that India had with Pakistan. It's giving weapons. 80% of the weapons Pakistan's getting from them. So we are stuck in a new bipolarity
And that's why we have to, and many of the old assumptions have disappeared. That we are critical. That
So at this
Americans will
point,
think
Mr.
we
Singh,
are
I just want to
critical,
come,
as in China.
I want to come
Yeah.
all of you and let's begin with you. So what, as per you, are the options that lie in front of India where you're dealing with a new normal geopolitically, especially around your own country, where dynamics have drastically changed?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
No, I think you have to just reconfigure your diplomacy. And some of it is the old experience of the last century. We have to start looking at diversify your trade. I don't know why we haven't done it so far. But we've been let down very badly because the Europeans have backed out.
True.
Otherwise, the Europeans were one of the poles that we were looking at in a multipolar world. Now, how do we create a multi? The Japanese are there, the Koreans are there, but they've all got a deal with the Americans. So now we have left stranded as far as the deal is concerned. So we have to do a deal. In that, nobody is going to help you. But long term, you have to plan in terms of really not depending on Americans. And that's why weapons already, there's news. We have told them we are not interested in the F-35s. You can't rely on the Americans. So I think the trust which is gone, as Mr. Jalani put it, is going to be very difficult to restore. So the Indian diplomacy will get reconstructed over the next decade or so, 5 years to 10 years.
Mr. Chalani, would you want to come in? Because internally, hopefully, this will push us to make those reforms that the country has been crying for. But diplomatically, what would you think currently would be the best path for India?
Firmness with engagement should be India's approach. India cannot just be making strong statements. In fact, India handled Trump better in his first term. In his first term, Trump stripped India of its GSP status. He also slapped tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum. What did India do? It imposed counter tariffs. And those counter tariffs came into force in June 2019. That galvanized US exporters. They lobbied in Washington for relief from the Indian counter tariffs. That eventually led to bilateral negotiations, and a deal was reached on the eve of the September 2023 New Delhi summit of G20. Then both sides compromised and a trade deal was reached. Today, again, we have to approach Trump in a similar way, because if we turn the other cheek, he is going to keep slapping us. Look at the way his harsher treatment of India than China. That really is astounding. India is a strategic ally. China is America's main adversary and competitor. But he handles China with kid gloves, but he's driving the US-India relationship with an iron fist. As far as what Pakistan is doing, and it's linked to what, to the questions that you asked earlier. Look, we should not normalize Pakistan's behavior. Pakistan may have engaged in nuclear blackmail earlier, but we have never seen a Pakistani army chief make such threats openly, publicly. He's saying he's going to take half the world down. He's going to nuke India. He says he's going to
especially whether if we build a dam, the water treaty, he's bought all of that up.
He's going to bomb India's hydro infrastructure, not realizing he's a reckless guy, but being reckless, he's also quite silly, because he doesn't realize that by bombing any Indian hydropower plant on the Indus River system, the consequences will be felt by the Pakistanis. The death and destruction will happen largely downstream in Pakistan, not in India. And if in response India were to hit...
But it rightly termed as saber rattling, Mr. Chalani.
Yeah, but that should prompt us first to review our no first use nuclear doctrine.
Okay.
Can a no first use nuclear doctrine be relevant when there's a army chief in Pakistan making these kinds of threats? Now, also when he threatens to bomb India's dams, should we still hew to this government approach of keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance? Keeping a treaty in abeyance is not defined in international law. International law only recognizes two things: suspending a treaty or abrogating it. India should reconsider its Indus Waters Treaty policy too.
Mr. Sajjanhar, would you want to weigh in on what Mr. Brahmachalani, said? Because does clearly, Asim Munir's explicit linkage of water disputes to potential missile nuclear strikes underscore the resource competition, which could have far-reaching complications? And how would you reckon India should deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to respond to a couple of comments that have been made. Number one, it was said that we should not be turning the other cheek. I don't think anyone is turning the other cheek. I think the statements that are emanating from India, from the Ministry of External Affairs and from the Prime Minister are very categorical, that these are our red lines. We have drawn the red lines and we are sticking to those red lines. So, let's be clear of that, and let's not sort of, put it that we might be turning the other cheek. Not at all. The second is also on the issue of buying F-35s. You would remember that, Mr. Trump offered F-35s even when Prime Minister Modi was in Washington, D.C. in February. We have not taken up that offer. We realize that F-35 does not meet our needs. Our defense community, our Air Force community has very categorically stated. As far as Munir's statements are concerned, definitely, as I said, we need to raise it with the United States also, because, such sort of statements, the rant that he has engaged in, couldn't have been done.
I'm running out of time, and I want to bring in
going
KC Singh in this. Does it really matter, or could it really help raising this with the United States of America, though diplomatically we must? Because, Mr. Singh, let's look at what's happened in the last 48 hours. You have the Baloch Liberation Army, which has now been labeled as a terrorist outfit. All of that where, where India's role, which Pakistan has never been able to prove in support of the Baloch army. So these are all, signs which America is giving out, which can be really countered by going back to America and playing the diplomatic game and saying, how can Pakistan do that on American soil?
No, I think we shouldn't do it. It depends at what level you take it up. It should be taken up at the diplomatic level. The embassies can take it up and so on and so forth. But I don't think it should be done at much higher levels. You don't want to involve Americans in the Indo-Pak differences.
True.
If you recall, that's one of the issues that Trump has, because he says, I'm the one who mediated between India and Pakistan, so you don't want to draw Americans into it by doing that. But make the statement, certainly, and should be forcefully done, which has been done by Ministry of External Affairs, but we should call in the CDA and read out the riot act to him. And ambassador should, in Washington, do likewise. Go to the State Department and tell them that we would like you to criticize this. How can you put up with a thing like this, which is being said in your country? Tomorrow, another country comes to India, whom Iranian leadership comes here and starts cursing you out. How would you react? That needs to be brought to the American attention.
All right, it's going to be a tightrope walk. I appreciate all three of you for joining us, gentlemen. Thank you there and giving us your comments. I'm going to quickly, right now,